Hi, you're on the Reddit Confessions channel. Let me take you straight into the moment everything shattered. She was slicing cantaloupe. That's it. That's how it started. After nearly 4 decades of marriage, the truth arrived not with fireworks, not with tears or screaming, but with the slow, quiet sound of a kitchen knife against the cutting board. The morning was normal, the weather boring. The dog still hadn't learned not to bark at squirrels. And there I was, standing in the doorway in socks, yawning, half listening to the radio. Then she said it. I cheated on you. Years ago. You don't need to say anything. I want to say it out loud before I die. No drama, no emotion in her voice. Just a simple fact tossed into the air like it didn't hold the weight of a freight train. And then she went back to slicing cantaloupe. At first I thought she was joking. Loretta had that kind of dry sense of humor, the kind that aged like expired milk. But when she looked up at me, her eyes weren't playing. I asked one word. When? She didn't blink. When we lived in the blue house. With the rose bushes, that was 30 years ago. 30 years. I felt my hands start to sweat. I actually laughed, a strange, pathetic little noise that caught in my throat. I asked, was it once? And she just shook her head. She shook her head. That's when I sat down on the kitchen chair and stared at the floor. Suddenly, the tiles seemed unfamiliar. The walls looked staged, like I'd been living on a movie set someone else directed. Loretta wiped her hands on a dish towel and calmly placed the cantaloupe slices into a glass container, like she hadn't just ripped open the center of my chest and pulled the past out into the light. She said his name was Malcolm. She met him at a writing workshop she'd been attending on Saturday mornings, the same workshop I had encouraged her to go to because she needed more hobbies. He was single, charming, and younger. She said she got lost in the attention, that it made her feel seen again. And then she added, I stopped it before it got worse. But it still happened. I still lied. She said it was eating her alive. Funny, because now it's eating me. 30 years, and I had no clue. We built a whole life, raised 2 kids, lost jobs, buried parents, celebrated anniversaries. And all that time, she knew something I didn't. And now, at 64, I'm left wondering, what else do I not know? She asked if I hated her. I didn't answer, because the truth is, I didn't even know who I was hating. That night, I didn't eat. Not dinner, not a snack, not even a sip of water. I sat in the recliner with the TV on, but I couldn't tell you a single thing that played. Loretta came in twice, once to ask if I was coming to bed. I didn't answer. The second time, she left a folded blanket on the armrest and whispered, I'm sorry again. Then she walked upstairs. I don't know why that whisper stung worse than the confession. Maybe because it sounded like she expected to be forgiven, like the air between us was only slightly bruised. I tried to convince myself it was old, ancient history, that people grow and change and mess up, that she chose me in the end. But every time I got close to swallowing that thought, another one punched me in the throat. I never had a chance to react when it actually mattered. I never got to know the betrayal in real time. I never had a choice. And somehow, knowing that made it feel worse. At around 3 a.m., I opened our wedding album. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to anchor myself in a version of our life that felt solid. But as I stared at the photos, Loretta smiling, me holding her hand like it was everything, all I saw now were cracks, fake smiles, a future I walked into blindfolded. I looked at the photo of Malcolm. Yes, he was at the wedding. Not in the front row, but close enough. He signed our guest book, wishing you a life full of joy. I wanted to rip the page out. In the morning, I watched Loretta move around the kitchen like nothing had happened, pouring cereal, humming lightly, her robe tied loosely at the waist. She noticed me standing in the doorway and said, I didn't sleep much. I figured you didn't either. No apology this time, no guilt in her tone, just facts. Like we were back to being domestic roommates again. I finally spoke. Why didn't you tell me when it happened? Her answer was instant. Because I didn't want to lose the life we were building. That hit me like a brick. So you kept me in a lie to protect your comfort. I asked her, did you love him? Her silence was so long I thought she didn't hear me, but she did. She just took her time destroying me. I thought I might back then, but it faded. It wasn't real. Wasn't real? I walked out of the room before I said something I couldn't take back. I went to the garage, sat in the car, turned on the engine. Not to drive, just to sit in silence. That's when I saw it, in the old glove box. A photo I hadn't looked at in years. The four of us, Loretta, me, and the kids at Silver Lake. She had her arm around me in that picture. And now I have to wonder, was it wrapped around him in her head? The worst part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the calm. The maddening, composed calm Loretta carried around like a perfectly ironed napkin. She confessed, and now she was simply done with it. Like someone crossing an item off a to-do list. I was the one left behind, emotionally barefoot in a room full of broken glass. And she had the nerve to act like the healing had already started. That afternoon, I stayed out of the house. I drove nowhere in particular, just circled neighborhoods I didn't belong to. Parked outside unfamiliar strip malls, stared at people who had no idea I was unraveling inside my 2009 Buick. I ended up behind the old middle school our kids once went to. The playground was empty. The same yellow slide was still there. The one Abby fell off when she was 8. The same day Loretta took her for ice cream while I waited in the ER. Funny, I used to think that day showed how well we worked as a team. Now I wondered if it had just been convenience. Performance. I called my brother Claude. He's younger, lives 2 states over, and works too much. We aren't close. But I needed to say the words out loud. I told him Loretta had confessed something huge, that she'd cheated decades ago, with someone I once considered a friend. There was a long pause. Then he asked, "Is she cheating now?" I said no. He sighed. "Then, what do you want to do?" I didn't know. I hated that I didn't know. I'm 64, Claude. I don't start over. I don't crash on couches. I don't swipe on apps. I clip coupons and overwater houseplants and rewatch the same 6 documentaries on the History Channel. This was supposed to be the stage of life where things settled, but now I felt like I was free-falling through a past I didn't authorize. When I got home, she was in the garden, kneeling in the dirt, pulling weeds like nothing ever happened, like the marriage wasn't cracked wide open. I stood at the back door and just watched her. She looked peaceful. Her hands were dirty, her brow furrowed with focus, her lips softly moving like she was talking to the plants. When she finally noticed me, she waved me over, and I, like an idiot, walked out there. She said, "I want you to ask me anything. I'll tell you the truth this time, the truth this time." That phrase hit me like a punch, because it meant everything else had been a lie. She said I could ask her anything, so I did. I didn't even think, I just blurted out, "Was there ever someone else besides him?" There was no hesitation. She didn't need to search for the answer. Her mouth twitched like it had been waiting for the question. Then she nodded, just once. There was a second man. That was when the numbness finally broke. My jaw clenched so hard I thought I heard my teeth grind. I asked her who. She said she didn't want to give me his name, that it wouldn't matter anymore. "It matters to me," I said, almost shouting. She looked up at me from the dirt, like I was the one being unreasonable. "You don't know him." It was in Vermont, during that writing retreat I went on the year after your dad died. Vermont. Writing retreat, I remembered it. I stayed home, grieving, drinking too much, and pretending I was fine. Loretta said she needed creative space to clear her head. She was gone for 10 days. I even helped her pack. I kissed her goodbye in our driveway and told her I hoped she'd find inspiration in the mountains. Apparently, she found it in someone else's bed. I don't remember what I said. I think I just turned around and walked back into the house. My ears were ringing again. This time, it wasn't from shock. It was rage, quiet, simmering rage that scared me. I don't get angry easily. I grew up swallowing it, but something inside me was clawing at the edges of my throat. I went to the upstairs closet and pulled out the old photo albums. Not because I wanted to relive anything, but because I had to look at them now, through this new lens. I found pictures from the Vermont trip. She was smiling in every one, relaxed, radiant, like someone on the edge of falling in love. She had that look in her eyes, that faraway gleam I used to think meant she was writing poetry in her head. Turns out, she was probably rehearsing lies. Later that night, she came upstairs and knocked softly on the bedroom door. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Not because I was angry, but because I genuinely didn't know who she was anymore. I didn't want her voice contaminating the silence. She whispered through the door, "I told you, because I respect you." I almost laughed out loud. Respect. She called 37 years of deception, respect, and yet, I still couldn't bring myself to tell her to leave. The next morning, I stared at my own reflection for what felt like hours. Not out of vanity, believe me, there's nothing flattering left about a 64-year-old man whose world just collapsed. But because I was looking for signs, clues, weakness, maybe something in my face that screamed, of course she cheated. But all I saw was an exhausted man with too many lines on his forehead and a toothbrush that suddenly felt like it didn't belong to him. I skipped breakfast. Loretta didn't ask why. She just sipped her tea and read her book like we were a normal couple easing into retirement. I couldn't take it. I walked into the garage and opened every box we hadn't touched in years. Boxes from when the kids moved out, from when we renovated the basement. I wasn't looking for anything in particular. I think I just needed to feel like I was in control of something. That's when I found the binder. It was tucked beneath old tax returns and yellowed wrapping paper, a black zippered binder with a red tab. I recognized it instantly. It was from the year she started journaling again. She used to say writing helped her process emotions. I never once read her journals. I thought it would be disrespectful. Now, though, respect felt like a currency I couldn't afford to give. I opened it. The first few entries were harmless, mundane, grocery lists disguised as inner monologue. Then, slowly, it shifted. I recognized the date. February 12th, our anniversary. The entry began. He brought me roses again. He always means well, but I feel like I'm disappearing. I kept reading. Each page chipped away at me. Her words were soft, but brutal. He kisses me like it's routine. I miss being wanted. Another page. Malcolm looks at me like I'm still bright, like I matter. She wrote about their encounters, not graphically, Loretta wasn't that kind of writer, but emotionally, deeply. She described the sound of his voice, how he made her laugh mid-sentence, how she felt alive again. That word repeated itself. Alive, alive, alive. Was I dead to her all those years? And then one entry made my chest seize. If Wendell ever found out, I wonder if he'd even fight for me. I closed the binder. My hands were shaking, not from betrayal this time, but from recognition. Because she was right. I never fought for her. Not really, I just existed beside her, like wallpaper. And now I wasn't sure who I hated more, her or myself. 2 days after finding the journal, I decided to go to the attic. Not for anything in particular, but because it was the last part of the house that still felt untouched. Like maybe the truth hadn't reached it yet. There's something strange about climbing a creaky wooden ladder into a dusty space filled with forgotten holiday decorations and baby clothes. It feels like stepping into a graveyard of who you used to be. I found a box labeled Wendell College Stuff. I hadn't seen it in years. Inside were old notebooks, some Polaroids, and a bundle of cards tied with twine. Most of them were from Loretta. I untied the string, slowly. One of the cards was dated a few months before we got engaged. It said, "I think I'm almost ready to leave the past behind. Maybe this is the right forever after all." At the time, I thought she meant an old breakup. Now, I'm not so sure. But that's not what broke me. What broke me was the envelope hidden behind the cards. A small one, yellowed with age, sealed and unmarked. I opened it and pulled out a photo. A sonogram. My chest locked up. We had 2 kids, Abby and Garrett, both planned, both cherished. This one wasn't either of them. I stared at the image, trying to decipher the date in the corner. It was from the 2nd year of our marriage, long before we even talked seriously about starting a family. I flipped the photo over. In Loretta's handwriting, it said, "I'm sorry I couldn't keep this secret and the baby too." I sat there in the attic, unable to move, breathing in dust and betrayal. She hadn't just cheated, she'd been pregnant. And she never told me. Was it his? Did she end it because of the pregnancy? Did she get rid of it without telling me? Or did something happen? Miscarriage? I didn't know. I still don't. Later that night, I stood in the doorway of the bedroom and asked her straight out, "Did you get pregnant by him?" She froze. Her face didn't fall. It calcified, like she'd prepared for that moment but prayed it would never come. She didn't deny it. Instead, she said, "I thought I could carry it and make you believe it was yours. But I lost it, and I was relieved. I hated myself for that. I still do. The room spun, not just from anger, but from the sheer weight of decades of falsehoods. My entire concept of love, trust, fatherhood, it all blurred into something murky and unrecognizable. She asked if I wanted her to leave. I didn't answer. Because what do you say to a woman who buried this much under your marriage and then handed you the shovel? I didn't sleep that night, not even for a minute. I just sat on the edge of the bed like a ghost in his own house, listening to Loretta breathe softly beside me, as if nothing had changed. But everything had. The woman I built my life around had quietly destroyed the foundation of it while I was busy believing we were solid. At sunrise, I packed a small bag. I wasn't leaving permanently, at least I didn't think I was. I just needed to breathe somewhere that didn't reek of betrayal. I drove to the lake house, my late parents' cabin, 2 hours away. I hadn't been there in years, but I still had a spare key under the wooden owl on the porch. The moment I stepped inside, I felt like I could finally exhale. It was musty, cold, unloved, but honest. I made coffee on the old gas stove and sat at the table staring out at the water. I kept wondering, how long had I been a background character in my own marriage? Was I just comfortable for her, a safe option while she lived a secret life in the margins? That afternoon, my daughter Abby called. She'd heard from Loretta that I needed space. I tried to sound normal, but I guess I failed because her voice went sharp. "Dad, what's going on?" I told her I couldn't explain yet, that I would, just not now. She was quiet for a long beat, then said something I'll never forget. "You know, Mom was always really good at hiding when she was hurting. I wonder if she got just as good at hiding other things too." That sentence haunted me, because Abby had no idea what had happened, and yet she knew something had always been off. I stayed at the cabin for 3 days. Loretta only texted once. "I'm here when you're ready to talk. I don't want to lose you, even if I deserve to." I didn't reply, not because I was punishing her, but because I genuinely didn't know if there was anything left to salvage. I kept thinking about the life we had built, the family dinners, the Christmas mornings, the inside jokes. How many of those moments were real? How many were staged? On the third night, I woke up in a cold sweat from a dream where I was walking through our house, but every room was empty. Just drywall and nails, nothing on the walls, no furniture, no signs of life. When I reached the bedroom in the dream, Loretta was sitting on the floor, smiling, and then she said, "You built all of this for us, Wendell. I just never asked you to. I came home on the 4th day. Not because I had all the answers, or because some dramatic revelation changed everything, but because the silence stopped feeling like strength and started feeling like fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of letting anger turn into bitterness. Fear that I'd spend the rest of my life measuring everything against a past I could never change." When I walked through the front door, Loretta was in the living room, sitting on the couch with her hands in her lap. No music playing, no TV on, just her, waiting. I sat down across from her. For a long time, we didn't speak, and then I asked her the one question I'd been avoiding. "Why didn't you leave me back then?" Her eyes filled with tears. "Because even in the middle of all my mess, you were still the only person who saw me as worth saving, and I didn't want to give that up. That should have made me angrier, but it didn't. It just broke something open in me. I wasn't ready to forgive her, not completely. But I was tired of carrying the weight of betrayal without asking myself why I'd been so blind for so long. We talked for hours, about everything, not just the affairs, but the emptiness, the lost years, the times we both drifted and didn't say a word. There were tears, some raised voices, some laughter that surprised us both. And somewhere in that mess, we found a thread, a thin, fragile thread of something that still felt like love. Not the fairy tale kind, not the flawless storybook version, but the kind that survives wreckage, the kind you rebuild slowly with scarred hands and hesitant hope. It's been 3 months since that night. We're in counseling now. We go for walks more often. We hold hands again, not out of habit, but because it still matters. There are moments when I look at her and feel the sting. But there are more moments now when I look at her and feel peace. She told me the truth. I stood there like a fool. But I stayed. And somehow, that's where the healing began. Thank you for listening. And now, I'll leave you with this. What's a moment in history that you believe changed everything, but people rarely talk about? Drop it in the comments below. You're watching Reddit Confessions. Subscribe for more stories that dig deeper than the surface and remind us all that even broken things can still hold meaning.